Those of you local to Colchester will probably have seen splashed all over the newspapers about a local man named Ian Drew who was representing a new group called the Essex Residents Association when he went into Colchester Council to have his say on 5G and the resulting hoo-ha because Mr Drew mentioned COVID vaccines and lockdowns and several other things along with the 5G. Of course, he immediately got branded as a conspiracy theorist by, yes, you've guessed it, lovable Lee Scordis. Bless his little cottons. But the person that was on the receiving end of the most amount of flack from both the press and Councillor Scordis was Councillor Andrea Luxford-Vaughan, because she was sympathetic to Mr Drew's concerns over 5G. Unfortunately for her, she didn't express it in, let's say, scientific terms. So this is what got her into so much trouble.
Is because there is no evidence to say they don't cause harm. And certainly people much cleverer than me, physicists, have done research that suggests that actually, especially in young people, it fries their internal organs, including their reproductive organs. Now, there's no proof because we haven't been doing it long enough, but I'm deeply sympathetic.
So, yeah, frying probably wasn't the best word choice. And because of that, the Local Standard and the Gazette had an absolute field day on her. Thanks in part, we suspect, to Councillor Lee Scordis. So as Councillor Scordis was at that meeting, and he's never one to miss the opportunity to call someone a conspiracy theorist, from the meeting he was tweeting at a Colchester Cabinet meeting where a conspiracy theorist is spreading nonsense about 5G. And then he went on to try and discredit Councillor Luxford-Vaughan by saying, incredibly, Councillor Luxford-Vaughan, Lib, agrees with the conspiracy theorist on 5G, as apparently no one has proven 5G doesn't hurt people. She's a cabinet member. Well spotted, Councillor Scordis. She is. Now, the Standard at least interviewed an expert, rather than Councillor Scordis, to give their opinion. Professor John Frank of Edinburgh University said there is no evidence to support Ms Luxford-Vaughan's claim about 5G mask affecting people's internal organs. He said it is not going to fry people's innards, that's ridiculous. Well, she herself said there's no proof as well.
Now, there's no proof because we haven't been doing it long enough.
But he did say more research is needed to establish the long-term effects of radiation emitted by 5G networks, and conspiracy theorists could take advantage of the uncertainty. Moving into a 5G range, we are exposing people to a range which there is almost no research. And finally, if you need 5G masks every 100 to 200 metres, how many masks are needed? About 35 times as many. So then when the Gazette asked her to comment, and she'd had more time to think about her answer a bit more, she replied, "The jury's still out on the science. There are qualified people that have mapped the radiation from telecommunication towers and believe it is possible that within a certain range there could be health implications to humans and wildlife, but it's too early to determine what the long-term effects might be." Then, because of her more careful word choice, Councillor Scordis then started spreading misinformation about Councillor Luxford-Vaughan by tweeting, "Very troubling views for anyone to have that's in power. The councillor concerned is strongly denying she said what is recorded live at Cabinet." No, she's just phrased it better, Councillor Scordis. I do hope you're not breaking your code of conduct, because whilst we know it makes no difference at all what you say about the public, what you say about other councillors may well get you into the degree of trouble that it did Councillor Moore. So joining me to discuss all this is someone who's very well versed in 5G, and that is Ian Jarvis, who has been into computers since 1968, and he qualified in 1976 with a degree in computer science. And Ian goes round all over the country talking about 5G and advising councillors. He worked in the computer industry for over 30 years before retraining into the health industry, where he also started studying the effects of radio frequencies. Alongside him is a familiar face to many of you of Karina Cooper. But what you may not know about Karina is she is a phenomenal physio with an extensive knowledge of electrotherapies such as pulse shortwave diathermy and interferential therapy. And she totally nerds out on how these things affect our tissues and physiology at a cellular level. So as many of you may be aware, 4G and 5G towers pump out radiation at a similar frequency to a microwave oven. So whilst it's obvious Councillor Vaughan shouldn't have used the term frying, just how far off was she with her description, and were the newspapers fair on her? So we're going to look at that and also how the technology works, the difference between 4G and 5G, and any effects it may have on our body and the environment as a whole. So let's dive in and see what Ian Jarvis and Karina Cooper had to say on the matter.
That is, physicists know very little about biological tissue. They don't work with it. So when a physicist starts telling you it can't possibly affect a human being, ask them what biology they know. I've only heard one physicist, a professor of physics, actually describe a mechanism how the short waves of 5G, for example, the millimeter waves, can actually use the sweat glands as an antenna to go into the body, deeper into the body. And she's right. I mean, I think it's quite justified to compare it with a microwave oven. There is differences, of course, but it's the same frequency. You know, the microwave cooks by jiggling the water molecules. Well, you two have got more water in your bodies than I have, because I'm a little bit older, only a little bit. A baby would have more water, so it affects them more because of that greater water content and the thinner bones that they've got as well.
Tissue impedance is something that we looked at through physiotherapy. So recognizing the electromagnetic frequency effect through the bone, through the tissue, and again noting that the fluidy ones are going to sort of transmit easier. Bioelectromagnetical.
Electromagnetic, yeah, exactly. How can it not affect us? That's my question. How can it not affect us? So although she exaggerated, you know,
I'm fully on board with the sentiment of it.
Me too, yeah. I mean, it's going to affect every single cell in your body. You know, it's coming over us all the time. It's going to affect every single cell in your body. So the way it affects you, the way it affects me will be different.
Yeah.
And that's it. Generally speaking, my thinking about it is it will affect you where you are most weak.
Would now be a good time to explain the difference between the basic Gs that we're used to and what the difference with 5G is?
Yeah, sure. If you've got an antenna here, then it's beaming out radiation in 360 degrees, as if it in a sphere, like the radio and TV.
Yeah,
it's what they call an isotropic wave. It comes out in patterns. I like to say if I dropped a stone in a pond, a still pond, you'd see those ripples going out.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's just like that, but in 3 dimensions. And if you drop another stone in, you know, 50 meters away, you can see the ripple effect and the way it all jumbles up together, and you get interference patterns. So if you each had a mobile phone on, for example, as you're sitting there talking with me, the signals from that mobile phone would be going out and they'd be intermingling and bouncing around, and you wouldn't know what your exposure was by the end of the next hour or so.
I'm going to switch mine off now you said that.
Yeah.
So the normal Gs we're used to, the generation, they come out sterically. What's the difference? What does 5G do that's such a big deal? Why are people so concerned about it?
The difference is that it's not isotropic. And it makes what they call a collimated beam. It's not like a laser. A laser is more focused. It's the waves are actually parallel. It's what they call a parallel beam. And a physics professor, she was explaining this to me. I can't explain the technicalities to you, but it aims a beam at your phone. So if you wanted to make a call, Corinna, the beam would go to your phone. If Rachel wanted to make one, a second separate beam would go to her phone.
But what if I was standing in between the beam and Karina's phone? Is it going to come through me or round me? How does it work?
Through you. Through you. Yeah. The frequency can go from the same frequencies that currently we use with 3G and 4G and 2G right up to, in theory, at least 300 gigahertz. We're using up to about 5 at the moment. So just think of that as a range. I have no idea if anybody's tested 300 gigahertz, none whatsoever. And you know, it has not been proven safe. Even coming on to the International Commission of Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection, which is the body that is used to give the councils freedom to say we don't have to take any notice of health effects. Okay, that does not say if it is safe. Nowhere in that paper does it say EMFs up to this level are safe. What it actually says, and I would recommend every single councillor on the planning committee should read it, as they should read several other documents that I can point out to them, ignoring the fact that it's not a commission anyway, but we'll go around that for the moment. It says it's for the protection of humans. That's it.
No plants, no wildlife, nothing, just humans.
Absolutely, protection of humans. And then it goes on to say, so it's for the protection of humans against substantiated adverse health effects. So they're acknowledging that there are adverse health effects with radio frequency radiation. That's ICNIRP, the International Commission on Non-Ionizing Radiation Protection. It's a really important document for people to read. I guess there's probably only half a dozen of us in the UK who's actually read it.
I've read it, so add one
You've
more.
read it? Power to your elbow then.
I was looking into it for EVs because of the constantly adjusting frequency of driving them. Your body doesn't get to adapt to a single frequency, and their recommendation, the maximum exposure was 30 minutes. And I'm thinking, are they going to have to change bus drivers every 30 minutes?
Yeah.
Or do they even know about that?
Do they even know about that? They're probably ignoring electric buses with
that's one thing they want to bring into Colchester, the rapid transit system.
Coming back to IGNOR briefly, so it actually says that in there, and then not only does it say it's the protection of humans, that then it goes on to make lots and lots of exclusions, like anybody with metal in their body, for example, including pacemaker and implanted devices as well. Yeah, to dental, to braces. To contraceptive coils, to earrings, all those metal things, you're excluded. Sorry. And if you're undergoing a medical treatment, you're also excluded. So how many of us is that left? So how many people does it protect? Not many, I suspect. And then I said it doesn't say it's safe. What it says, again, down in the body of the report, it says, if your exposure is kept below R level, you are unlikely to suffer harm. Now, the last time I looked in my scientific dictionary, unlikely is not a terribly accurate word to use in the context of what they're supposed to be doing. I wouldn't go quite so far as to say it's not worth the paper it's written on, but you get the gist. I mean, if it doesn't protect humans because of all those exclusions, and it doesn't even mention the things that Rachel just said, the environment. Yet again, in planning applications, I have read the telecom application saying IGNIRP standard protects against humans and the environment. No, it doesn't. You know, and the case officers are not challenging the companies on these points, probably because they haven't read it.
A microwave is like 3,000 watts of electricity go, so it's very powerful. Whereas, what is the power of a 5G tower, if there's such a thing as an average?
Well, they do vary. It's not my research; it's other research. There's a French paper, and they estimate that it uses between 40 and 70 average domestic homes.
So but doesn't it dissipate? I mean, are you saying it is?
Yeah, the radiation. Well, it will go. I mean, Nokia, in a paper that they wrote, says we can service thousands of customers over hundreds of square miles with one 5G tower. Now that's powerful. You know, it's going to send that out all that way, and you can get a usable signal a long way away.
But also in some of your talks, you've mentioned that the telecom companies are warning their investors there could be future liabilities, which sounds very similar to the tobacco industry and pharma industry, etc., etc. And also you mentioned that the insurance companies will not cover for EMF damage. So it's obviously something they have done risk assessments on.
They have. The annual reports of many of the insurance companies were saying exactly that. They were saying it's an emerging risk. We need to put money aside because we may be held liable. And even some of the telecom companies have said the same thing. Nokia, for example, is quoted on the EHS Trust website as saying exactly something like that. We could be held liable in the future.
Wow.
So they are expecting.
Yes, that does rather lead one to conclude that there could be problems, and they are well aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly something that could be used and should be used in writing to a council. That's another difference between when 4G came out. People who were following the industry and business pretty well knew what it was going to do. We had a pretty good idea and no secrecy with it. 5G, it's all about secrecy. It has come from military, as we said. It's not been developed and tested in the public domain. And that is certainly a big question that we need to ask. If there are all these collimated beams whizzing around the place, and they are going to go through us at different times, what is it going to do? At the moment we're not really sure. The technology is different, and where the technology can take us is different.
And also the amount of it, because I think you said there's
yes.
the satellites. The Americans are putting 20,000 in, and they want to put 50,000 up in the sky. But that's going to over the entire Earth. So basically, there is no escape.
Well,
you said the power of the sun is higher, but we can escape the sun. If you know you're sensitive and you've been overexposed, you come in, you put
exactly.
on.
You get out of the way.
There will be no escape anywhere on Earth,
yeah.
And we don't know the effects.
And,
so
the most recent figure I've seen is 1 million.
1 million.
Absolutely.
Well, then I think we need to apologise to Councillor Luxford Vaughan and say she was dead right. They're going to slow.
Dead right, yeah.
So a lot of people don't worry about the radiation coming from phone masts because there's radiation everywhere. And this is true. There's radiation from the sun. We're exposed to all sorts of different frequencies, electromagnetic from the earth. But the difference is between the natural ones and man-made. So the man-made ones are pulsed and they're square-toothed. So the data is packaged up in a very complicated way so that they can compress it and get more into the signal. And basically, the more complicated the signal, the more stress it puts on the body. And that's difficult to comprehend because we can't see it and we can't hear it. But if you could see it, so this visualization is by no means accurate. It's not. It's just to give you a sense of the difference of what our bodies are bombarded with 24/7. So while we can't hear anything, our cells do pick up very much so on frequencies and vibration. Now, I don't have one of those gadgets that measures it and can show you, but the next best thing I have, and I found this out since doing these videos, is this. Let me just switch this light on. Now, can you hear a buzzing noise? Because this one light, let me show you. Tiny little light that I'm sitting probably about 2 or 3 foot away from, that has wrecked several videos before, or the audios of several videos before I figured out what it was. That causes something called adaptive stress. So our cells are constantly trying to deal with all of that background noise. And it's everywhere. We're already sitting in a superfit, from Wi-Fi to just the electrical currents and goodness knows what else that's going on. So this technology is going to be rolled out everywhere, whether we like it or not. Now, no one's asked us. It's not like we need 5G. We don't need any faster cat videos streaming. It's not for us. It's for all the technologies that they wish to bring out to support what they are doing moving forward. So autonomous vehicles, whatever needed for AI, all this progress is happening without any consultation as to whether we, the people, actually want it. And I'm sure there are some people that want electrified everything. They want to be able to talk to their lights, their fridge, and have everything on voice command and live in this digital world utopia. Great, go build a digital city, have everything automated, have it full of AI, and enjoy yourselves. But to put it on the rest of the planet, there will be nowhere on Earth you can escape these frequencies. And I know already 4 people that really struggle to varying degrees, some which can't even go into towns and cities where they pump out free Wi-Fi. They are that sensitive. So as funny as it may sound to some of you and thinking it's a conspiracy theory, We do need to have a proper adult conversation about this before we are absolutely swathed 24/7 in a form of radiation that nobody knows how it is going to affect us all. We owe it to ourselves and the future generations. And we've been through all this before with things like DDT, with thalidomide. It's safe, and it's not. And it takes sometimes decades, if not hundreds of years, for them to admit things aren't safe. And let's face it, if it was 100% safe, we wouldn't need organisations like ICNIRP. They wouldn't be necessary. So Ian Jarvis did share his extensive knowledge with us for a good couple of hours, so I have loads of video footage. If there is interest, I would happily do a video where he spoke about how to challenge 5G masks being installed. He works with a lot of counsellors. A lot of counsellors think there is nothing that they can do and their hands are tied, and that really isn't the case. There's been a couple of occasions where masks have been turned down on health reasons. So if you would like me to put that video together, please do leave me comments below. You can get in touch with Ian Jarvis via the Stand Up Wolverhampton website. I'll link to his webpage. He's got a lot of resources on that website. So if there are councils that want to have his advice, he's happy to do Zoom calls and give you lots of resources that help you successfully challenge these 5G towers going everywhere. So for those that want to know more about the technical aspects and how the effects this has on the body, Karina and I attended a fantastic talk by Oliver Percival in Gloucester last summer, and his talk is probably one of the most concise I've ever seen. So I will link to that in the show notes. I will also link to the footage of Ian Drew from the Colchester Residents Association so you can see all the concerns he raised. But we did go through a few of them with Ian Jarvis, so let's take a look at those now.
All devices that are connected via radio waves are transmitting radiation. It was first discovered in 1932 that radio and radar workers were affected. We are now bathed 24/7 in electrosmog. Electrosmog is the totality of all electrical and electronic devices, electric wires, power lines, wireless devices and antennas. 5G is designed to deliver concentrated and focused electromagnetic radiation in excess of 100 times current levels, in the same way as do direct energy weapons. We've been measuring the electromagnetic radiation being emitted from many of the installations around Colchester, as are our colleagues doing in other parts of the county. All the readings taken are well in excess of the International Commission for Non-Ionising Radiation Protection Guidelines. We're very much aware of the government instructions to local and city councils that on planning applications, no objections on health grounds should be considered. Constitutional law states that we do no harm. This must override Telecoms Legislation Act.
Right, thank you,
It's
Ian.
up to you
It
as
has
a
to
council
stop.
who represent the people to stand by this and take note of the concerns of the public
We
about
are, Ian.
5G.
A lot of what Ian said is actually true. For example, did 5G come out of the military? Yes, it did. 1971, I think it was, the US Navy wrote a paper which simply listed the research that had been done on EMFs and biological tissue of 2,300. That's 1971. The military's known about this for all those times, and they are researching. We've got some very good things out of military research, and some of them are in our homes today. Microwave ovens, for example, came out of the use of radar in the Navy. On cold nights, the sailors would go and stand in front of the radar because it warmed them up. And
So the microwave was originally called the radar range.
Radar range, yeah. Yeah, I mean, you're right, Rachel. He did say some very relevant things. Again, another of Ian's comments when we're talking about the low traffic neighbourhoods, and he mentioned the smart cities. Well, there's a quote in several planning applications. It's a good way of picking up information, actually, reading planning applications. One of the telecoms companies, okay, this is not me, telecom company, has written, the way 5G works, it is closely connected with the smart city agenda. Those three words. That's Clark Telecom telling you that. I'm not making it up.
Yes, because Ian read something like that out, didn't he, during his speech?
He did, yeah. And they follow that up with quite a few things. You know, there is absolutely no doubt about it that is all the messages that we are getting. And they are in black and white from telecom companies and from government as well. I've got a government paper which talks about the expectation of autonomous driving buses and taxis. So essentially they're saying we'd be quite happy for all bus drivers and taxi drivers to lose their jobs.
Yeah,
that's another way of looking at it, of course. So there's absolutely no doubt about it whatsoever. There are ways and ways of saying it,
yes,
and ways of introducing it, but nonetheless, it is coming. Another of my favourite quotes on a paper that they wrote some years ago about 6G, to the effect of Ericsson believes, blah blah blah, we will virtualize every aspect of your life. So everything is going to be virtual.
Yes, if a member of the public comes forward and mentions this, he's immediately a conspiracy theorist.
Exactly.
So does that mean these telecom companies are conspiracy theorists as well?
Well, quite. I mean, I say, that says there's an agenda. That quote I just read out to you, the smart city agenda.
Even our local councillors will not accept that, because they mock us because we've questioned, is Colchester going to be turned into a 15-minute city, because we have concerns over it, and it's like, oh, don't be ridiculous.
Yes.
It's like, well, you're using all the language, you're installing all the systems, looks like a 15-minute city, smells like a 15-minute city, are you sure? But it's like, no, you're a conspiracy theorist. Okay.
Yeah, it is. You're right, and you get all those things thrown back against you all the time.
I do think the power of the word conspiracy theorist is losing somewhat. Like, people are becoming more aware.
And in the last 300 years, where it's gone from there to what we've got now, we are actually a swamp. That's why we call it electrosmog. Even a few years ago, when 4G came out, it really upped the game, because that's really when it really started swamping everything out. And when particularly naturalists in the field noticed the biodiversity loss and species loss, places like Mount Nardi was one of the first to be observed by the local naturalists, that the biodiversity decline as soon as they put, or shortly after they got a 4G tower put on that mountain, which was going to service presumably the city. Things noticed. So don't forget in your talk to the council that 4G is also dangerous. It's all dangerous, and that they are still putting up new 4G antennas on these 5G masts that they're putting up. They're also putting, well, sometimes they're saying they're putting 3G up, although most of the telecoms are getting rid of 3G. In terms of phone usage, 3G is the safest frequencies set to use on your smartphone. It will radiate you less than will 2G or 4G.
Oh,
and they're turning it off.
Switching it off this month.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So,
but the thing is, it's the cumulative effect. Although it might be minor at the moment, if they do get this grid in the sky, you will be bombarded day and night unless you basically live in an underground bunker.
Yeah. I mean, I've actually got a canopy on my bed.
I thought you were going to say you've got an underground bunker.
On a first floor flat, yeah.
That's high level prepping.
That is.
I'll come and dig your garden, Rachel, and dig a bunker out.
Don't give me ideas. Thank you so much for all of that.